This is Phantom Electric Ghost, and we're live on the air with Jason Browne from jasonbrowne.com. And
What's
you're
up,
a
man?
public speaker and an author. Oh, well, I'm doing fine. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, man. I'm doing great. Great to be here.
Well, it's fun to be here. I did mention your website. You see the URL, the jasonbrowne.com. That's fully clickable on every platform that we're on right now. We're live on YouTube, Twitch, and Facebook. That will be clickable on those platforms as well as any other platform that we're on. We're on most podcast platforms. I want to let people know that we are a featured podcast on the Newsly platform. And you check that out by checking out that with a ghost coupon. And you can check, that's free for anybody for 30 days if you want to check us out there. We'll be on Newsly later tonight. Now, what we're going to talk about today is like the secrets of public speaking. You've been,
Yeah.
you know, really collaborated with a lot of giants like Facebook, Microsoft, Rotary International, and TED Talk, TEDx
Yep.
Talk. So we're going to
Yeah.
talk about that. But a couple of things I always ask before I get into the meat of the conversation is it what
Sure.
motivates you and why do you do what you do?
So I'm. Why do I do what I do, and what am I motivated by? I love to connect with people, and I like to think. I like to think that I'm a little bit clever with things and somewhat entertaining. So I like to take really, especially really difficult topics or challenging topics, and present them in front of others in ways to challenge them in the way that they're thinking. So that is really fun to me, finding unique ways of conveying a message to a large group of people and leaving them with something to take away from the event. Like public speaking is one of those things. You could say a lot of words on stage, you could say a lot of words behind a microphone, but if someone's not taking something away from it or they're not locked in, then there's something missing. So I love the opportunity to challenge people's thinking, connect with people in a unique way, and share some ideas in a fun and unique manner that's really that I don't know a lot of people that do it in like a fun, weird way like I do. So that's why I enjoy public speaking. And where it comes from is just I've always been a curious kid. I've always been the kind of kid that's that plays chess. I used to play chess. I still play chess. What am I kidding? I play chess still. And I like to. When I was a kid, I used to be the one that would be staring outside the window and be like, "So what's this thing over here?" in class, and I would get in trouble because I'm asking too many questions. So that's me, curious.
Mhm.
I love to connect with people, big ideas.
That's really interesting because a lot of times, folks tend to be in this age. We kind of have clone culture, or
Yep.
culture just to going after numbers. Like you think about social media, like you get the cat video, got a million views, got
Yep.
200 million views, they got a trillion views. Everybody wants to just
Yep.
just clone that with the same song. Well, yeah, you can get a million views, but did you say anything? Did you say anything that's
Yeah.
worth me actually taking the 5 seconds to look at it and like, oh, there's another cat video. So how can you make an impact? And as a songwriter, I'm a songwriter and a producer, and like I want to
Yeah.
actually take somebody's original ideas, original thoughts, and not
Yeah.
just clone whatever's going on. Because I think the secret sauce every human being has is their individuality. And the kind of that's and a lot of people are scared of that because there's vulnerability in that.
Yeah, I do agree with that. So there is a to be your true authentic self. There is a high level of vulnerability because if you, as a public speaker, as someone who does what you do, runs a podcast and makes music, to be in front of people and make an impact, you could do what everybody else is doing and just kind of be in the middle of things, and it's almost like you're being at a party, right? If you're hopping to the party and everybody's kind of socializing, you can kind of socialize too. But if you're the one at the party that's like, you're wearing something slightly different, you're speaking in a different tone, maybe you decided to drink tea in a fancy tiny little cup as opposed to some other sort of beverage that everybody's having. Like if you set yourself apart, you run the risk of being the one on the outside. And so I think that's the hard part of being a musician, being a public speaker, is finding a way to find your unique self while still also being able to connect with people. It's not something for everybody, and you have to be vulnerable, and it's tough. Sometimes it can be tough.
Yeah, it's difficult to have originality. Today we got so many people like with like use AI, use robotics, use sampling. Um,
Yeah.
and it's like, okay, because I want to guarantee my connection. I want to guarantee the algorithm, right? I want to guarantee, everybody wants to guaranteed success. And it's hard, when you're out there to have your individuality and have guaranteed success, because like if you haven't done something before, like if you're on the
Right.
bleeding edge, the adoption of what you do immediately is probably not going to be that high. Right? It's like eventually you can command an audience. You can be the law of attraction. People will come to you, but a lot of times you don't get all those shots today. Like you got so
Yes.
many chances at bat. So how do you deal with that?
So how do you deal with like you only have certain amount of chances at bat? That's what you're saying. Like, and how do you maximize those
Yeah,
opportunities that you get?
and
Right.
maximize that.
Um,
Yeah,
so I think that comes down to it's just like any other. It's just like any other sport, any other job that you have. When you have the moments to shine, it all comes back down to practice. It all comes back down to rehearsing. It comes back down to putting yourself in that space. So, for instance, to speak specifically about public speaking, if you have that one chance to hop on stage at this one event and make your mark, if the first time that you're really speaking in front of other people is the time that you're going out on stage, and then that's your test, that's your moment of the first time you're truly doing this is your big break. Sure, that might happen, but if you really love what you're doing, you would have been practicing all along. You would have been the one. The movies do this. You'd be the one practicing in front of the mirror. You'd be the one going to parties that like at a dinner function when someone's like, "Who's going to make a toast?" You're the one making the toast. When you're out having fun with your friends, you'd be like, "Hold up, let me tell you a story real quick." Or, "What do you think about this story? I really want to use this next time I have my opportunity." If you're not getting feedback and you're not practicing, then when the moment comes along, you're going to be testing out your material for the first time. Think about it like, so the way that I like to think about it is like comedians. When we see really top tier comedians, Eddie Murphy just dropped a new movie on Netflix. The 48 was it not 48 hours? What was the joint?
I don't know, it was like the
The
their actual. Is a new one?
Yes.
New Beverly Hills
Yeah,
Cop?
there's a new Beverly Hills Cop. Yeah, Beverly Hills Cop. So there's new Beverly Hills Cop. When we see Eddie Murphy doing his classic stand-ups back in the day in the red jacket, or if you want to think Kevin Hart in today's world, we like to think that, they're so good at what they do. That's the first time that they're doing this
Never
thing.
that way. Yeah.
It's never that way, right? They've been practicing that for months and sometimes even years of like refining the material so that when you see them, it's like, oh, this is really good. They knocked it out the park. And the reason that's the same type of mentality that a public speaker has to have. If you really take it seriously and you really want to craft your skills, you have to practice and you have to make sure that that's not the first time that you're stepping on stage, and ask people for some feedback. Those are the things.
I think that's important because it's like the 10,000 hours that everybody talks about. Like if
Yes.
you're an athlete,
Yeah.
you're a musician, like you get the muscle memory. You're playing bass
Yes, you
guitar.
do.
Like it's like
Yeah.
not the first time you ever been on stage, but somebody might think that's a one hit wonder. You went to 0 to 100.
Yeah.
But you've been playing that
Yeah.
bass. You probably done like 10,000 hours. Right? You probably
Yep.
have it down so you don't have to look at it. Right? Your piano
Yep.
player, you don't have to. You know it. You have this muscle memory. You have the confidence, and it goes from it's like showing up. Like my grandpa always said, wait, if you show up, that's half the battle. Like you keep on showing up, then
Yep.
people will come to you because they'll find out about you. But if you're scared to show up, no one's ever going to hear you and see you, and this stays in your head, and it stays in the loft as the painter has 100 paintings in his gallery, and I'm not ready. He never
Yeah. Not
had
only,
the confidence to show up and actually take the hit. Yeah, because you're going to take a hit to your confidence.
yeah.
Somebody says they don't like it.
Yeah, that's the thing. A couple things. So your point is like some people are not going to always like it, and you have to find a way to like one that shows two things. One is building up the resistance and the resilience to just to push through those moments and find ways of navigating that, like and accepting the fact that not everybody might not everybody's going to like something. And so like that is a really key piece of figuring out how to navigate this space. And it just it helps you refine your content. Somebody telling you that they don't like it, take a breath, take a beat, be like, what feedback did I get? So and so didn't like it. So a lot of people take that and they're like, oh, they didn't like it. I don't like them anymore. That's the, but it's every piece of information. There's some quality there, and if you're able to like take it, be vulnerable, accept the fact that not everybody's going to like your stuff. You can refine your stuff and be even stronger. And the second part is when things go wrong, when things don't go as planned, the better you are familiar with like having that practice, having that resilience on stage. When the mic doesn't work, when you have a heckler, when you slip on stage, when something goes really offbeat, you can navigate that and find your way back and still keep the crowd locked. But that comes back down to practice, 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 practice.
Yeah, it goes to the idea. I know Miles Davis and Herbie Hancock talk about it. Is like there's no bad note in music unless you act like you hit the bad note. So
Yep.
so if like there was a story that Herbie Hancock was playing with Miles Davis, and he hit the wrong chord for the composition they were playing, and he thought it was going to be over because I guess he was relatively new in the quartet. And he was like, "Oh man, this is going." And Miles played off of it and changed the key to match his chord.
I remember
And after
hearing about that.
He asked Miles, like, "Look, why did you do that?" I said, "Well, you gave me an opportunity." So then there's a concept like infusion. There's no bad note. There's only opportunities. So if you're kind of like a type of person that said, "Well, I got to hit this composition exactly every night. I got to do Hotel California every night the same way," and the Eagles actually did that. And the band rebelled and said, "It's not fun doing it that way. You're killing the band because the precision, the fans didn't even want it that way." It's like if you play it just to feel it, right? Not having to hit every note exactly the same way every night.
Exactly.
Sometimes you can take that kind of be in the present moment, be in that kind of process flow. It's like, oh, I'm in the flow state. And you can live with that. I mean, you can take your muscle memory and all the times you showed up, and you have to trust yourself.
Yes, you do have to trust, and that's hard to do. To trust yourself is difficult. As human beings, confidence is something that everyone struggles with. Confidence is something that even the top tier people in the world that you look up to, they struggle with confidence. And to be able to just trust yourself, it has to be rehearsed. It has to be rehearsed. The willpower and the ability to push through difficulty is not something that most people are born with. It's something that you train for. If you run a marathon, you don't hop up and run 26K in that morning. Some people can. But most people need to practice. They need to warm up. They need to get stronger, and they have to have the failure, the success, and everything in between. So when you hit those bad notes, it's like, nah, man, it's not a bad note. We just changing the song today. We improvising and having a little bit of fun.
Yeah, a lot of creativity. And I've talked to authors, painters, actors, film directors, and they always mention it's the mistakes or the missteps or the things that you have to go through. Like the ocean isn't always going to be calm. You have to be able to navigate when there's a storm. Otherwise, how good a ship captain are you ever going to be if you've never gone through a storm, right? So you have to go through things to actually, it when you see a great piece of art, that artist went through something and they conveyed it. And it's not always going to be the sunny day. They created a great piece of work. It's usually all the stormy weather that created a good piece of work.
Yeah, and to that point, the stormy weather creating a great piece of work is another piece of vulnerability when it comes to public speaking. Not that you have to do this every time, but finding ways of sharing pieces of yourself, like true, honest pieces of your personality, of your past, your history, your emotions, your mental. If you're able to tap into that from a storytelling perspective and interject, it doesn't matter what the topic is. It doesn't matter what the topic. You could be talking about the most mathematical, statistical, physics-oriented, quantum, whatever it is. If you if you find a way to interject your own personality into whatever that talk is going to be a stronger thing. And when you have those storms, a lot of times the storms that you have in life are going to be the things that allow you to find better ways of telling a story and connecting some of these pieces together. But it takes that moment of vulnerability. I was just speaking today with somebody helping me craft a story for one of my talks, and we were playing around with this story, and we were going back and forth, and we sat down for a good hour. We sat down for a good hour playing around with a piece of my own past that is now turning into what might be one of the most interesting talks that I'm developing. I'm not gonna give that away yet. I'm still working on it. But it's like it's when you go through the storms, a secret to making sure that you're crafting a really great talk or great speech or preparing for a presentation is finding a way to interject part of yourself into that, even if it's not the most stormy weather that you interject.
Yeah, even a humorous story. I mean, I was with a writer, and what they love to do is throw these humorous, like little, footnotes and notes into their conversations and throw things that had these kind of universal, humorous impact. And
Yes.
it was usually something from his childhood, like that was going
Yes.
on that was funny, and he found a
Yes.
way to interject it into anything, and it was just it's interesting how you get some writers is like, well, I got to put the tragedy in it, I got to put the melancholy in it.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes like
Mm-hmm.
I have always been very impressed with comedians because a lot of comedians are really good dramatic actors, and it's like why?
Yeah.
Because they seem to be able to pull from the comedy is usually based on pain, and then because they can make it funny, it translates, but there's usually some like hint of pain or a lot of pain in it. Richard Pryor, and you can
Yeah.
look into it, and they're like, wow, it's like you can really evolve something, and it has some depth. I'm just saying the depth of how you can tell that story, and it's always
Yes.
interesting to me. They're not just a one trick pony. Oh, he's just a comedian. No, like a lot of times
No.
there's a lot of depth.
And that's where and that's as a public speaker finding the way to tell your stories and telling the right story for the right other pieces of content is really important. Again, it's going to take practice, but whether you're stand-up comedian or not, you gotta like one of the things that I actually did for when I was writing the last number of other speeches that I had, I literally just wrote down moments of my life that I remember. Moments of life I was just like floating around just for an hour, just wrote down, oh, I remember that time I was a kid. I remember that time I was in college, right? And then I just wrote down these things and maybe like a word that was associated with that story. Maybe it was music. Like I have a bunch of stories back in the day when I played with my band. Some of the best days of being on stage is such a wonderful experience with a group of musicians. It feels so good. So like maybe it's dealing with music, and maybe I'll add another word like family, because they felt like family. Maybe it's dealing with maybe when I'm a kid and I'm walking around the block with my parents. I'm like, or maybe it's a story that my parents told me about when I was younger, or even in college. Whatever the part of being a speaker and part of being a creative, part of being somebody in front of a microphone is to find the stories that are in your life and explore them. To take one, and maybe you don't even know where you're going to put it yet. Maybe you don't even have a talk yet, but finding and just being, maybe it's a journal entry into your journal, like whatever it is, to explore the moments of your life that are beautiful and connect them to whatever the content is. Your content will be a lot stronger as a result, and you can pull stories out when you need to. And so it's such a powerful move. That storytelling aspect is so important.
It's interesting you talk about being a musician. One of the great things I love about being a musician is like when you hit that magical moment when you're in a groove and it's kind of like nonverbal, and like you just hit this
Yeah.
like universal key, or you get this
Yeah.
universal rhythm, and like nobody's even telling you like, oh, what keys in it? What's the chord? It's like you don't need to even know. You're like you're in it, and it
You're in
just
it. Yep.
happens. And I think like I believe because if you're a public speaker, you're using a voice kind of like a singer, right? And,
Yeah.
and and the
That's
voice is
true.
an instrument. So
Yeah.
if you think about poetry, it's like it's songs, you can speak. I've seen public speakers have like a rhythm, like a meter, and
Yeah.
it's very much like songwriting or singing, in terms of being able to connect to the audience and learning how to use your voice as that instrument to kind of set the tone and get the frequency of the crowd, and you get that back and forth. It's very similar to a
Yes.
musician, that when you feel the crowd has actually synced up with you and they're almost like, they're waving the candles or they're moving side to side, you can feel it. And you can feel when you're not
Yes.
hitting, right? So then you can make correct.
Yep. And that's super difficult. And that's one of those things that takes practice. Is to after you've gotten to the point of feeling comfortable in front of a microphone, is to slightly adjust course depending on your audience, and that takes practice. So sometimes one of the things, a couple things that I do to help out with this. One, I get a lay of the venue. So if I'm going to go speak at a particular spot, one, I go in before the crowds are there, before everyone's there, if I have time, and I walk on the stage and I just look around. I just stand on stage for a while. Just look
Mm,
around on stage. Maybe I might go through an aspect of my talk or not. I just sit there and I just look around. I'm like, okay, this is the vibe, this is the energy. All right, this is how things go. I speak to the people running the show. So anybody doing AV, make sure that I'm talking with them. Just chop it up. Not just keep it all business. It's not like, so I have my presentation on a stick. Duh, 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 duh. Like that's one way of handling it, right? But it's also just like, hey man, you're a human being. I'm a human being. Like like how are you feeling? Like what's going on with it? They will give you insight to how things will flow. If the AV team is uptight, a lot of the other aspects are going to be uptight too. So like
yeah,
you got to
soundboard guys
get a
uptight.
vibe for that,
Yeah,
right?
you don't
And
want your
and so
soundboard guys
then,
to be uptight.
yeah, no, you definitely do not. You definitely do not. And then the last piece is after all those folks, speak to the organizer, but and also gauge the audience. Just because you have it all written out now. Some people do like to have everything scripted to a T, but this is level 2 expertise of public speaking. If you can map everything out, but you should, but I would recommend having things flexible enough so that if you gauge that something's off a little bit, maybe everybody just came from a very, like they're right after lunch, they're a little bit sleepy, or maybe
Yeah,
it's so hot outside and everybody's drained. Like adjusting slightly to accommodate for the folks that are in the room will make your speech so much stronger. But you got to have that flexibility to accommodate what the
yeah.
audience needs.
It's like that situational awareness. It's like I've always
Yes.
told a lot of musicians like that work is like, you got to read the room. You got to read
Got to
the
read the
band. You
room.
got to read your
Got to
teammates.
read the room.
Is the
Yes.
bass player, did he get enough sleep? Is he a little off? Like maybe drummer got to step up, or somebody's got to step up because he's like, oh, he's not his night tonight. I was like, okay, be aware of
Yeah.
it, make adjustments. Right? So if you
Yes.
read the room, and then it's like, oh, this ain't working. And I used to see Prince, and I'm a big purple head, and he could read like if his song wasn't working, he said, oh, forget it. He would just switch into something else because he had so many. He's like, oh,
Yep.
this ain't working. And the fact that he could
Yep.
feel it wasn't working is like he still didn't force it. He's like, oh, I'm gonna move to the next thing. And I thought that was amazing the way he could just read the situation. It's like typical, like high level musician. They read what's going on. Not with this the room, the sonics of the room, the people, the bandmates, the crowd, everything. And
Yeah.
you adjust to it.
Yeah, so I mean, Prince is Prince. So like, okay, that's a high bar to hit, but
Yeah.
there is something super important about not forcing it, right? And one of my worst speeches that I've ever given was I was forcing the content. I remember it so clearly because it was so bad. Like I was forcing the content in a space that it wasn't appropriate for. I thought the content was great. The room was just not, that was not the setting, and I didn't adjust enough. I wasn't the prince of the situation to be like, all right guys, we're just hopping into the third song on the set list. Like I didn't do that. And when you're a public speaker, when you're upping the quality of your public speaking, you gotta be able to, let's just call it princify. You gotta princify the situation and adjust appropriately to get
Yeah.
that job done.
It's interesting. Like maybe you could tell me like do you have the a gauge on like what the most impactful event you ever participated in was based on what you were doing? or could
Okay,
you
well,
even?
it depends how you define impactful, but I would say as for I would say that the talks that I think that people connected really connected to. Okay, there was a time. Actually, this was one of the most pivotal speeches that I've given. I worked with a I was a part of this big event. It's part of the Rotary International organization. They have these events called IA. It was in Cali at the time, and it's a big stage. People from all over the world are there. A room full 1,000 people, just from every country in the world. Well, not maybe not every country, but a lot of the countries in the world were in this room, and I got a chance to. I wrote this one talk. I thought it was pretty good. I got some assistance from one of the speech writers that working that I would work with, and so we refined it a little bit. Partnerships and work collaborating is another whole topic, and we found like really cool ways of playing around with the content. And I stepped on stage. I did the thing, and afterwards, the response that I got was like, for still to this day, the talk was called M&M's, right? The talk was called M&M's. Still to this day, I have people coming up to me and be like, "Hey, M&M man, what's up, M&M's?" Just because the topic so connected, and I didn't realize why till years later. I was in a room full of folks who, on average age, probably was about 60, 65 years old. The core, and I did this by accident. I'll just say I was a little lucky here. The core piece of my talk was about my grandfather, and so that idea of my grandfather and his impact and his relationship with me connected to all the other folks who have grandkids in the room, and it hit just the right tone, and it hit the right message in just a way that everyone still to this day, M&M's. Hey, you gonna give me some peanut M&M's, Jason? So it's still. I'd have to say that's one of them. That's one of them.
That's cool when you hit that kind of universal key. There's this kind of idea
Yes.
that's out there. I mean, like I kind of got it from Pete Townsend because he talked about it, and it's like this rock opera he tried to do, which was like
Yeah.
Who's Next, but he came up with this idea called Lifehouse. And the concept was that the band was going to hit this universal key and create like this Tommy kind of rock opera, and all these
Okay.
hippies were going to get connected by music because he noticed as a musician there's this kind of concept of this universal key or like
Yeah.
connecting the people and seeing, he played at Woodstock, he played at all these places and he saw it. And then he wanted to turn it into a rock opera, but it didn't work. He couldn't get it to work. It ended up becoming Who's Next, their biggest record, but it was supposed to be another Tommy. And I always think, wow, he tried really hard to create this rock opera, but he couldn't get the story to work. And so it ended up not being there. But throughout the albums, this idea of like getting in tune with this key, and I'm like, why? It kind of spoke to me, and that I
Yeah.
feel like they, even to this day, I kind of think about it when I'm talking to people, talking about how you connect and you get into that zone. It's like
Yes.
a
Yeah.
universal key.
Yeah, yeah, but there's a couple pieces of your story that you're telling that is super important too. That he thought that it was going to go one way, right? Like he thought he thought everything was going to go right. I understand that, right? He thought everything was going to go one direction, but then it ended up another, right? That's what you're saying.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
one of the things is when you're speech writing and when you're delivering your talk, sometimes the place that you start and you think it's going to go, you be open to the idea that the way that you craft it might change by the time you're done with it. But if you don't lean into it and just like if your resistance to that shift again, that the ship change, the directional change, you're gonna miss a really great opportunity to like really lock into something amazing. Just because I'm gonna write a talk about cell phones. This is what I'm gonna do, and it's about how social media is terrible. Like that's what but then it turns into being something so much more nuanced. If your resistance to that change, that shift, you're gonna miss out on so much.
yeah.
Then the other thing is like when you do find that thing, dive into it, man. Dive into it, just like your story. It's a really cool one.
Well, it's awesome when a lot of times I do live rehearsals that I
Yeah.
just put onto Facebook and I record them onto my multi-track because I never know if I'm going to have a nugget. And I kind of read about a lot of musicians back in the 60s and
Yeah.
70s. They were really famous for doing this. They would just roll James Brown, a lot of the Motown guys, they just roll the tape and they just,
Yep.
Neil Young, Crazy Horse, tons of bands, Elton John, they would just run the tape with the band and just play and then go back and listen to the tapes and then find the nuggets and say, hey, that's the song. Instead of
Yes.
agonizing with like, we don't have a song, the jam sessions actually created the songs because they kind of let go. Like you're saying, you let go, like God, like you just let
Yes.
it go and you find that frequency and they like, there it is. And it's not point in time. Sometimes it's scattered all over the place. And then you
It
kind of
so is.
remap it.
No, so I didn't know that. I didn't know that that's how they made music. But that is one of my favorite ways to make music. I know we were talking about public speaking, but making music to me is one of my favorite things to do. And when my best albums are the ones in which you do just hit record and you don't even know what the words are. Sometimes you don't even know what the melody is going to be. You're just kind of like playing around with it. And then you listen back like, oh, that right there. That thing right, that nugget right there. And from a public speaking perspective, sometimes it's not you that notices. And this is where it comes back to this practicing thing. Like if you just get into the habit of telling stories or sharing the pieces of you, sharing these chords that might resonate. Somebody at sometimes for myself even somebody's like, "Yo, Jason, don't ever forget that story that you just told about you and your sister when you were a kid. Like that was a really great story." And then it's like, "Oh, that's one of those like licks maybe the melodies. That's one of those pieces of the song that you need to keep in to make sure that you play again." And maybe all the other stuff you can kind of get rid of, but at least keep that thing. And if you're not practicing, if you're not playing out in front of people, if you're not actually listening, recording, and maybe listening back, you're going to miss out on some of those
Yeah. So
beautiful
do you
licks and
record?
melodies.
Well, I mean, I know that in the spaces you're in, I know that they're recorded. A lot of your, public speaking must be recorded. But
Yeah.
were you always in the habit of doing like an after action review or listening to the feedback from your circle? Like we have producers
That's a
and
good question.
managers and engineers that will go say, hey, listen to that like that, and I'm like, what? That's what it is. Or even a fan that gets like a beta song you put
Yes.
up on SoundCloud and he's like, no, this is the thing you should be working on. This is the one that's good. And he's like, oh, well, I didn't
Yeah.
see that. I'm over here thinking this is it. You know?
Yes. So yeah. So okay. One, I don't go back and review my content as much as I should. I'm just gonna say it. I don't do it as much because I'm not gonna. I'm gonna make an excuse. I'm going to say that I don't do it because I'm super critical anyway. And if there's a flaw in it, I already know what it is. And by this point, it's like, oh, I messed up this, and there may be like 20 other things, but I know the big ones. And so, if I feel like there's nothing that I did wrong, then maybe I'll go back and watch it, just because there's always something that I can improve upon. But I don't watch nearly as much as I should. When it comes to other people, though, I will listen. Feedback goes back to one of my initial points. In someone in front of a microphone or on stage doing whatever in front of other people, feedback, good or bad, is so critical because other people are going to tell you what's great, what's not great, and it's up to you to be the one that chooses which ones I want to listen to. But if you're not receptive to people telling you one of those two things, you're going to miss out on so much. So while I don't always go back and review, I will listen to every piece of feedback. And if somebody could rip my talk, let's rip everything apart, saying it's terrible, I'm still there like, tell me more. Why? Why do you feel that way? What about the thing that's terrible? Why did you hate this part? Why did you get up and leave the room? Like, not that I had too many people leave the room, but I'm saying like,
Yeah.
I want to
Back
know
into it.
in detail, intimately, the worst things about what I'm doing because that's going to inform me to get better.
Yeah, it's important to have that kind of feedback. If you get somebody to say, "Well, I hated it," and you say, "Well, you didn't like what part of it did you hate?" And the reason why I
Right.
hated it, well, that's not very valuable because I can't really judge what you hated.
Yeah.
Like you saying the whole thing is
Exactly.
bad is okay. But like, yeah, it's like kind of like if you get the, your English teacher that went through and read marked the whole document. I had a teacher that did that, and I wasn't so keen on it. But then I had another teacher that used to kind of sugarcoat it. She was a creative writing teacher, and
Yeah.
she would come back with what was great about it first. Instead of giving all the red, she's like, "Well, this is fantastic," and then she kind of sneak in, "Well, you could do better here, 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 and here." But because she used to always kind of come in like the psychologically, she kind of understood like if I come in
Right.
with that type of thing, I'm not going to lose this kid who's going to say, well, I can't win with this teacher. So it's like if you can, it's not you're not always going to get that. Sometimes you're going to get that red
Yes.
mark through the whole thing, and then it's like, okay, well, I'll have to look at it. Take the ego
Yeah.
down a little
So
bit.
yeah, that's true. So people say you're supposed to do the sandwich feedback. What's the good thing? Then tell me the bad thing, and then like end on a good thing. If you're giving feedback, I would always encourage to do it that way, as long as you're being honest about the whatever it is. However, I don't think that most people spend enough time on the crappy stuff. Like for me personally, and maybe this just comes from a confidence point of view at this point. I I enjoy hearing the nice stuff, but if I'd rather spend twice as long on the bad stuff. And yeah,
Yeah.
it may sting a little bit. It may hurt a little bit. And as a kid and as a student, right? As a student, you're developing yourself. You have to be sensitive to that because you don't want to get discouraged. Like if you're just starting out public speaking, if you only focus on the bad stuff, you might get discouraged and not want to do it. Like there's that balance that you have to have. So focusing on the good stuff is good, but at a certain point, not at a certain point, at all levels, the good and the bad are valuable, whether they sandwich the good first or not. It's
Yeah.
important to just recognize, like, hey, thanks for that feedback. Let me ask you a few more questions. I may not listen to a single word you said, but I appreciate what you told me.
Well, I think it's important as you go, deeper into your craft to really listen because sometimes we get tunnel vision. I've
Yes.
always been a big purveyor of like crossing into zones where people say we shouldn't do that. Right. So if somebody tells me like, well, you're breaking this rule, well, I might be breaking that rule on purpose. So it's good that they recognized it. And I'm like, so I'm actually doing the right thing. So it's cool that they picked up on
Yes.
it. So I know,
Yep.
like, okay, well, I'm going the right direction because, like, I purposely was going into discordance on purpose. Right? I'm
Right.
purposely hitting things that are discordant or dissonant, and yeah, that might feel awkward to you because that's where I'm going. And so you're like, well, I want everything to be like melodic. Like, well, that's not what this song's about. So so yeah, he's like, okay, I hit you. You recognize that you were paying attention. That's cool. So, but if I'm trying to be melodic and you say there's too much discord, it's like, oh, I better pay attention to that because that's not what I was trying to do.
Right. And it goes back to your earlier point of like, of finding, of not being afraid to try something new, of not being afraid to break the mold. One of the things that in fact, I'll give you an example of this. There was one time I was going to give it, and I never pulled it off, but I almost attempted it. I mapped out my entire talk. So I was going to do a music and a talk at the same time. So one of the wonderful things in music that I love is an RC505. It's a looping station. It's
Hmm.
to me, it's one of the best instruments or pieces of technology on the planet. I love looping stations, especially that one. And I was like, all right, let's see what happens if I do two things at the same time. I feel like I'm pretty good at public speaking. I feel like I'm pretty good at making music. What if I wrote and designed a talk where I was able to use the looping station as part of the talk? And so I still haven't done it. So the punchline is I still haven't done it. But I set everything up, and the AV just wasn't working. It just wasn't working. It just wasn't connecting in the way. And I knew that the whole performance would bomb if I continue pushing that direction. However, in my back pocket, I'm still looking for the opportunity to combine the two. to have my looping station to loop certain aspects and even pull from the crowd to amplify certain aspects of the talk and use public speaking at the same time. Someone's going to tell me like, Jason, this is a terrible idea, and I'm going to look at them and be like, maybe it is, maybe it's
Sounds,
not.
oh, well,
Let's
I'm an
find out.
experimental musician, so I'm playing with like modular, synthesizers. I build
Yep.
stuff like
Yeah.
modes. I have a lot of gear that's very experimental, and part of that are samplers. And
Yeah.
samplers that can immediately pick up stuff. Vocoders that could pitch change your voice to male to female, female to male, like,
Yep.
change it into different everything. And I have actually experimented in live shows, like running a sampler off a mic and picking up the crowd, integrating it into the song, you know,
Yep.
and running things in real time and picking up stuff
Y-
and then running it in loops and moving them around. But I'm running it off, CV and gate and sequencers and other things. But it's just
You know what
trying to
you're doing, man. You know what you're doing.
with it with what is possible, because that's what I like about the innovators like Sun Ra. There was some massive innovation in jazz, even to this day. It's almost every type of genre he was into. One of the first, jazz musicians to ever even use a Moog was Sun Ra, the first
Mm.
one, before Herbie, before anybody else. And how he used it, I was like, wow. It's like so sometimes you can I like people who like to push it, like Hendrix, you know,
Yeah, of course. Yep.
Sun
Yep.
Ra,
Yep.
Davis, Coltrane, guys who are gonna push it. And people was like, well, what's that? What are you doing? He's like, you're breaking the rules. Like, why not? Like, why should you stay in the canon? Now, if you want to be in the canon, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But
Nothing
if you
wrong
want to
with that.
go against it, you shouldn't crucify him just because you don't stay within it.
100%. And again, it's going to be very difficult to do so. It's going to be very difficult to break the mold because everyone expects something certain. One of the things that I do often that I know a lot of other people don't do is that I encourage people to kind of heckle and talk and like shout back in the middle of like what is traditionally a very
One way.
standard talk. Now, in certain venues, I might not do it, but like I don't mind it because it keeps. It's a different style of talk. It's not going to be like you're going to sit there like you're in class and listen to me speak. It's
Professor.
this engaging thing. Like something. The best moments in the past like 6 months were random ones. So I'll give you an example. So I do this thing that's called I shake this bottle on stage, right? I shake this like bottle of soda pop on stage, and the whole time I'm shaking it while I'm making my points, but I'm not opening it, right? And at the very end, I'm like teasing people. I'm like, hey, do you want to open it? Do you want to open it? I'm like, no, I don't want to open it. And randomly in the talk, this one lady in the back is like, I'll open it. And I'm like, oh no. And so she starts coming up to the front of the stage at like being ready to open up this bottle I've been shaking up for 30 minutes. And somehow I play it off and she doesn't, because we were going to get in trouble with hotel staff. We were going to get in trouble with like the event organizer. It just would have been a problem, right? The whole point is not to open the thing. And eventually, like, but that moment, everyone was laughing. Everyone was like, oh no, what's going to happen? And
Yeah.
that moment could not have happened if I didn't encourage that type of atmosphere. And
Yeah.
so, is that going to be the same style as everyone else? No. Can everyone pull that off? Probably not. Could it have gone really wrong? Yeah. But I'm willing to take that risk and do things a little bit differently.
It's kind of like I don't know. I have this concept of the punk aesthetic, whether you kind of break the rules, in music. And if you have a
Yeah.
punk aesthetic, doesn't mean that you're like the Sex Pistols, but you could come across things like, I don't have to be in perfect pitch. I don't have to have my
Yeah.
drums. Everything doesn't have to be tight.
Mm-hmm.
It could be really loose. But what's important with a punk aesthetic is your attitude and your belief in what you're doing, right? So you believe in it so
Right.
much that you don't have to have perfect pitch. You could be Joe Strummer, right,
Yeah.
from the Clash. Doesn't have to have that perfect pitch, but he feels so passionate about what he's saying that you can get
Mm-hmm.
out there on the stage with the Who or Queen with anybody else and feel like he should be there. And so that kind of changed the mindset. Like, oh, you don't have to be Roger Daltrey. You don't have to be Robert Plant. You could be a Joe Strummer. You could be a Joey Ramone. You could have, you could be like Talking Heads, David Byrne. You could come out there and be like, Talking Heads, even bigger examples. Like, where'd that come from? Like, just come out there and just
Yeah.
do whatever you want.
Yep. Yeah, and that, but again, it's very difficult to do that, and it takes time. So if you're curious and want to hop into public speaking, and you haven't found your unique sound yet, if you haven't found that unique identity that will set you apart, it's okay. It will take some time. It took me a while to figure out what that was. It took these musicians that you're speaking about to figure out what these moments are. And but it takes time, it takes vulnerability, it takes practice, and it takes a little bit of confidence to be able to push through that to get to the other side.
One of the points that you were making in your questions you like to answer was like, there's so much conflict in the world, and what can you do about it? Now, as a public speaker, like you said, you like to take things on.
Mm,
Can you give an example, like in terms of
sure.
that type of level, how you approach it?
Sure. So I'll give you two examples. The first one I don't remember as much, but like, so I was one of the themes for, I do a lot of talks in Rotary clubs. And every year there's usually, at least up until this point, there's been a theme. This past year, I think it was create hope in the world. And I played around with this idea, and it's a very expected sentence. Create hope in the world. And then I decided to take my talk about creating hope in the world and dig into the word hope. And I hope you have a nice day. I hope things go well. I hope we use hope in a lot of various ways. And then we used to use it in a sentence as like, I hope create hope in the world. They're two different, there's two different uses of the word. And what I decided to do was dig into that and play in on how important the idea of concept of how hope connects to the individual, and not just make it this surface level comment that you might say and be like, every single time you say, I hope you have a nice day, or I want people to think back to the moment that I'm giving this talk. So that's a very simple one where it's a common phrase, tying it and using it, hitting it at an emotional level, and speaking to hopefully change their perspective and really emphasize what it means to create hope. That's one example. The second example is a little bit deeper than just hope and creating hope in the world. One other thing about creating hope in the world, from a Rotary perspective, they do a lot of things. They provide clean water. They help mothers and young kids. They do literacy projects. They do a number of things for people around the world. So creating hope is on multiple levels, and that's why I was giving the talk. I think it's important to it's not just, I hope you have a nice day. No, if we're creating hope, we're changing people's lives on a level that is outside of our day-to-day routine, and we should be recognizing that. The second topic was about privilege. And this goes back to my TEDx talk. Is I play around with this concept of the possibilities of privilege in the TEDx talk. The idea of privilege is a topic that most people are afraid of discussing. They're like, oh my goodness, privilege this, privilege that. Oh my gosh, I can't talk about it because it's part of the this left wing, right wing, whatever. It's not neither one of those things. And so what I do is I take this topic of privilege and I just say, hey, just almost like hope. We say it's a privilege to be in each other's presence. It's a privilege. It's a privilege to be here. We say this all the time. Everything that we have in our lives, me speaking to you, me having this microphone, you having this microphone, us being able to see each other, us being able to hear each other, us being able to know that I have a cup of water like not too far away from me that I can drink cleanly. All of these things are privileges. Some of these things that we're born with, some of the things that we're not, but they're all privileges. And I take this topic and I rip it apart and I say, it doesn't matter whether you earned it or not. It doesn't matter how you like to perceive it. If you have a privilege, put it to good use. And most people walk away saying, I've never thought about it that way. I have a few people being like, Jason, I disagree with your entire topic. And I'm like, that's fine. You can if you like. I don't It doesn't bother me. But if as long as I'm connecting to some folks and I'm making people rethink a concept to hopefully empower and improve other people's lives, that's what I think my job is. That's what my role is. My job is to take the things that we say every single day, think about every day, flip it on its head. And next time you think about that one little item, next time you shake up a bottle of soda by accident, I want you to think about the topics that I'm sharing with you. And you're like, oh, dang, I don't remember that guy's name, but he said shaking this thing up was important for me. I do remember that. I gotta make that phone call today. I gotta send that email today. I gotta make that donation today. I gotta do something for somebody else today. And that, if I could do that for just a handful of people with what I'm up to these days, speaking on stage, speaking with you, then I'm good. I'm good.
It's very important that like you challenging the preconceived notions. Just like I think a lot of writers we like to do that. You take
Yeah.
something and you kind of turn it on its head. You create people, you make people think about it. So when you
Right.
take the
Yeah.
idea of privilege, like people have a lot of overhead. There's a lot of baggage. So like
A
you
lot of
said,
baggage.
people just see it
Yes.
and they're like, oh, like I can't even go there. Like other, you talk about race. So, oh, I can't
Can't be
even,
good
I
again.
can't
Yeah.
walk in the room. I'm going to hit the bomb. Forget, like,
Yeah.
hit the landmine. Okay, I got to hit the landmine. I'm going to be out. But if you actually start to look at things like you said, he's like you make it as more digestible by forcing
Yes.
people to kind of turn it inside out and analyze it. Which a lot of times we don't
Yes.
take the time because I think we hear something and our listening skills are kind of lacking, compared to the old age, because I think we got too many
Yes.
inputs. But like, since you get all these inputs coming in, they're overwhelming you. Where back in the old days, Victorian days, you would read Blake's poem, you would read Tennyson, you'd
Yeah.
read Shakespeare all the way through, and you would actually digest what's going on, but you're not really paying attention, right? You hear something, you get triggered. You don't think about
Mm,
and so you immediately turn off the rest anything
that's
else that's being
interesting.
said, and you just took the trigger word, and now oh, this person's saying something I don't like. So then,
So that is you're speaking about a couple things. One, trigger words. One of the things that I choose not to do is I don't use trigger words in my talk about privilege. I don't say the word privilege for. No, I say it right up front, but I say it. I don't use the word privilege often, and I don't even bring up the word race until halfway through the talk. And this speaks to when you're giving a talk. So some people like to say, I'm going to talk about cell phones. So I'm going to say the word cell phone because that's what it's called. Knowing that the word, you might even be in front of an audience of people that don't like cell phones. Don't use the word cell phones. You could use electronic device. You could find other ways of saying the thing without using the words to trigger or set people off. We get so attached to no, it's defined this way. If your job as a public speaker is to connect with somebody on the opposite side, and you're creative enough to use other words to get your point across, if that is the only barrier that exists, finding other words to do that. So if I really enjoy the idea of not using and being okay with not using the one word that's going to set people off. The second thing I want to say about this is the following. If this is the reason why stories are so important. Two things. It's actually two things. Stories and hooks. A hook, story. How I start off every single talk, I hook immediately into a story. Hook immediately into a story. So I'll give you the beginning line of my TEDx talk. I say, you might have more privilege than me, and that's okay. In fact, I think that might be a good thing. And then for the next 2 minutes, I give you a story about me in India, hanging out, doing things, and beginning to piece things together. And I'm reflecting on myself being a black kid from Philly and all this other things. It's like, I have privilege. And now you're like, where the heck is he going with this? I have you locked. And now it's already like this trigger word of using the word privilege. I hopefully have shifted away from you being turned off to being curious. If you could be curious and create that level of curiosity, then you lock them. So hook, story, curiosity. How about those three? I'm gonna leave it at that.
That's interesting. It's kind of like, this the hook in a song. You get your chorus, you
Yeah.
got your hook. It's like the same structure.
Yes. Yes.
I see things in terms of music, so I always try to find a parallel.
That's you. You're not wrong, man. That is exactly what it is. That's exactly. Sometimes, okay, real quick. I need to hop on that. Sometimes on a song, it starts off with the chorus, right, and then it goes into the verses. Sometimes you just hop immediately into the verse, and that's okay too. Sometimes it's a long intro that kind of gets the crowd warmed up, and you could also do that. I love this music analogy, man. I'm loving it. There's a lot of ways you can take it.
Yeah, there's a lot of I like variation. Like the structure, like intros, outros.
Yeah.
Multiple verses, but it's like you think about trying to shake it up because a lot of people like the banger, right? Which is like, I'm gonna make the whole song the banger. The whole song is the hook, and it's like,
Yeah.
kind of, yeah, I get it because it's immediate and you go right to the real sweet spot. But it's like,
Yep.
isn't there something about building up or doing a decrescendo or a crescendo,
Yes.
or having an
Yes.
outro or having a timing change? You know, there's some things about, you would look at a really good actor and their delivery, like how they do their delivery, what they do non-verbally, right? What they
Yeah.
do with their hands and their eyes, and like there's a lot of things you can do without going right to the killer point, right? You can build up, you can, like you said, you can draw people in.
Yeah. So when it comes to this idea of layering, that's another musical concept that we can talk about. This layering and building this song with these verses and the bridges and the. If you're not a musical person, this may not sound right. Like, why are you talking about bridges? Where did bridges come from? Bridges is part of a song. It's a part of song structure. Anyway, when you're that is one of the things that I think is super important. I've heard a few people give talks and it is all chorus. So it is all chorus. It's like chorus, 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 chorus. What happens is that by making everything the chorus, everything now becomes minimized because there's nothing unique
Drawn out.
yes, there's nothing unique about it. And so the beauty is to give people space in between the hooks. Chop the hook, let it simmer, make a couple points, bring them back to the hook. One of the things I like to do is a lot of crowd participation and call and response.
Call and
So
response,
that's why
yeah.
call and response. M&M's, like the whole Eminem thing. That was the chorus. Came back to the M&M's. I found kept bringing that back. Even just maybe sometimes in songs you will even hear like in the middle of a verse they'll hint at what the chorus is. Like they'll even use a similar melody in the middle of the verse and keep going back to the verse. It's still honoring the chorus, and
Yeah.
that to me some of my best talks are when I do that just right. The chorus is solid. Everyone knows the chorus. By the time I'm done, everyone's singing along, and there's enough content in the verses. And I switched up there on the bridge just enough to change up and make things interesting. I really like this musical like flow concept, man. This is a solid thing for speech writing. Grab your favorite. Okay, here's my challenge to you. If you love public speaking, if you want to hop into this, listen to your favorite song and write a talk in the same style as your favorite song. See
Yeah.
how that goes.
That would go really well because, to me, like the great songs that they have, that their focus is like exactly perfect, right? They hit the chorus at the right time. You have an intro, like, so you can tell the emphasis. It's not all banger. Like
Yeah.
you get drawn in. I always feel like songs tell a story. The best songs are like little mini movies, like sound
Yep.
paintings in your mind. They pull you in. You feel you feel however you feel, but you get drawn, and when you hear that, like I think
Yeah.
when you do a great speech, it probably has the same effect as a great song to put that context in somebody's mind. It's like every listener that hears a song has their own vision of how they affects them. I think every person that hears a great speech, it's the same thing. They pull something that connects to them, and there's like some personal moment that's their moment that they somehow see that you hit it, and they find the parallel. And you might not know exactly what that is for that person, but you hit it, right? And so that's that kind of universal key that we're talking about before. But
Yeah. On top of that, one at least one more point to this is like that's the reason why having the chorus only sometimes is really important, and you do different points during your verses. If you said the same exact thing over and over and over and over and over again, you're not adding enough variety for somebody to the variety of your audience. Like you said, somebody might take this nugget away, somebody might take this nugget away, somebody might take this nugget away. If you don't add different styles of nuggets to your or different going back, wait, I'm mixing metaphors here. I'm using nugget. Let me go back to music. If you're adding certain lyrics, you can maybe have a few lyrics for this one crowd, this one audience, having a few lyrics for this audience, having a few key changes that for maybe you want to add a little interjection of like some gospel, like a gospel transition in there, some gospel chords in there, just for maybe that's part of your audience. Adding these little pieces along the way adds the variety necessary to connect with various pieces of your audience. You need the variety to have a good talk.
well, I want to thank you for this talk. And like, I always try to interject my musical concepts into the way I do podcasting because I feel there's like it's a way to connect it, kind of thread the
Yeah.
needle. But you played with me on that, so it's great.
Yeah, man.
But I thank you again. It's been a great podcast. And if people click on your jasonbrowne.com, how do they find what do they find there as they
So
close
you're
off?
going to find information about me as a public speaker. Holler at me if you ever want me to talk at an event. Right now, I'm looking for more speaking gigs by the end of 2024. So holler at me, but I'm always available for that. You can also sign up for my mailing list for the upcoming book that will be related to the topics of possibilities of privilege. I'm very, very excited about that. Yeah, you can just find a little bit more about me. Grew up in Philly, all that kind of stuff's on there. So yeah, connect with me sometime.
That's great. So when your book comes out, maybe you come back and we have a book episode where we push your book.
I would love it. We'll find some way to connect it with music, or I'll just talk about the parts that actually relate to music because there are some, and so we'll make sure that that's in there too, man.
Okay, well, have a great night. Thank you very much for being a guest on Family Electric Coach podcast.
And thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure. It's been a privilege to be here as well. Thank you.